Alright, Uma Fight Camp. Hopefully I can talk over the noise. The garbage collectors are collecting the garbage, but I didn't know if I'll be able to post this video later on, so I have to do it now. Alright, hopefully everything will be alright, won't be too much noise, or the noise won't be a distraction. In this video I want to talk about training. I want to talk about training, because training means different things to different people. When I talk about training, I am talking about self-protection. Alright, training in a certain method, using gross motor skills, defining what gross motor skills are. These essential skills by gross motor, just so you know, these are skills that generally people learn or children learn to do in the first 3 to 4 years. All right, pulling, pushing, dropping, these kind of things. All right, this is why if you're teaching self-defense, you have the hammer fist, you have pulling, you have pushing, and these kind of things. All right, because these are gross motor. All right, you see young babies going like this. They're going like this. Or you see them pulling, or you see them pushing. These are gross motor skills. The skills that you learn in the first 4 years of actually your life. All right. Some will say a little shorter than that, but max is 4 years according to the experts. All right, in that 4-year period. So when I'm talking about training, I'm talking about training like that. All right, training in a way that you can call on these particular things when the metal hits the road. All right, when you're under duress, when you're stressed. All right, when you feel like you're going to pass out, when you're fatigued, when you're breaking out into a cold sweat, these kind of things. All right, hyperventilating. These things that you can call on to help protect yourself and your loved ones that don't take a great deal of rehearsal and are not complex. All right, where you have to remember these complex techniques for them to work, and they're by definition, because they're so complex, they're low percentage. All right, so that's the training that I'm talking about. Now, there are some people in particular who talk about, there was a question, all right, and this question had Joe Rogan saying, all right, yes, Joe Rogan, saying that one thing that he didn't like was, and again, I just want to repeat, that one of the reasons why I bring this person up is because of the kind of impact, all right, the kind of impact this person has. So, if Jay-Z said something, all right, and he said something that I didn't think was correct, all right, and I heard about it because I don't listen to music, a lot of music, and I don't, know who, I know Jay-Z, but I don't listen to his music, all right, for whatever reasons, okay, it's it's really not that big of a deal, and it will bore you, because it's not that big of a deal, not that I hate him, anything of that sort, right, some people can probably figure out why I don't. But if he said something, and I thought that millions of people would find out, or millions of people would hear it, then Jay-Z would then be the figurehead of that thing I disagreed with. That is all it's about, okay? It's not about a personal thing, as it's about having to say something about these people who might put out information that is a detriment to some lives, or the health of people, or even the mindset of some people, or the social health of people, all right? So, when we're talking about what Joe Rogan said, what Joe Rogan initially said was this, is that when he looks at self-protection, self-defense videos, what he sees are people demonstrating against people who are untrained. In other words, these things would not work with someone who had a black belt in Jiu-jitsu, or they would not work with someone who had a black belt in Taekwondo, or had a black belt in Karate, or had boxed, or something of the sort. So me, as someone who has seen wanton violence, who has seen blood-curdling violence, all right, to the point where there are things that I have seen that I cannot talk about. And no matter how corny this may sound, I cannot talk about them because I will get emotional. Not necessarily crying, but my faith or my faith in mankind might be shaken by me recalling some things that I saw, what people can do to each other when they're angry. All right, so there are some things that I definitely do not talk about. There are some things that I've seen that if it comes in my head, I take a walk, I go to a park, and I might watch birds or watch butterflies, or or just watch squirrels, because I try to kind of, there are things that are just not just stabbings or not just a fist fight. Things where when I saw them, I really knew that it was free will that we had. I knew what anger could do, but I just looked and just thought about who does that. You know, when we get to that point, are we human or are we less than human? So I have seen those kinds of things happen. So I get offended when people who are not qualified to talk about those things talk about them. Okay? So what he said was he didn't like seeing people who teach self-defense, videos self-defense, but they're doing it against an untrained person. I want you to listen up. And I want you to listen very, very good to what I'm saying, people. All right? I have seen people get stabbed. I've seen people get shot. I've seen people attacked with meat cleavers and have their hand almost completely cut off before somebody could grab the person from the back who had the meat cleaver and bring them down. I have seen those things, and I will tell you that the black belt or the technique of an individual has nothing to do with what I saw. That kind of training has nothing to do with what I saw. Nothing whatsoever. Nothing whatsoever. So when someone like Joe Rogan says, well, these people are untrained, I have to tell you what trained is. If you were training in, say, for example, like he trains in Taekwondo where there are no kicks to the head, all right? If there were kicks to the head, where there were no punches to the head. If there were punches to the head, and they were still kicks to the head, in which there was not with him. There were no punches to the head with the way Joe Rogan trained. But let's say he punched to the head. And let's say he was able to kick also, just like he did, right? Let's say he used all of Taekwondo. He still would not be prepared. Not be prepared or qualified to talk about knife attacks. I want that to sink in. If Joe Rogan fought the real Taekwondo and punched to the head, which he didn't, if he trained in the real Taekwondo and competed in the real Taekwondo, he still would not be prepared for a knife attack, for a scenario knife attack. There's nothing that he has in his Taekwondo training that prepares him for that attack. Even if you look at his Jiu-jitsu, right? The last thing you want to do when someone has a knife is move into them with your limbs, move into them to attempt some kind of takedown. That's the last thing you want to do if someone has a knife. So even if we look at his jiu-jitsu, the kind of jiu-jitsu that Eddie Bravo is famous for, which is strictly sport. And Eddie Bravo said himself that his whole point of starting 10th Planet was to teach people to win fights from the ground. All the years he's been there, all the years he's done that, there is not one real self-protection teacher, not one real self-protection teacher that would tell you the first thing you should do is go to your back. Or even the first thing you should do is go to the ground, if you don't have to, in a violent confrontation. So if we even look at grappling, there is nothing that Joe Rogan or Eddie Bravo has ever done in their life that qualifies them to talk about how to deal with a knife. So when they say, or when one of them says about the training, they need to know, and you need to know what training is. I saw an individual. I saw it. He was going into a nightclub. I knew him. He wasn't a great friend of mine, but I knew him. So he's having an argument with this guy. And he's insulting this guy. And he's telling this guy, yeah, this and yeah, that. And the guy does not want to fight. You know the guy doesn't want to fight. In fact, the guy even looked a little afraid. The problem is that the guy that he was insulting, that my associate was insulting, was with his girlfriend. The bouncer comes out, the doorman comes out, and he says, you guys can stay in line, and I'm going to let you in, but you got to squash this argument right now, because I don't want any problems inside. If I know there's going to be problems inside, then I might as well not let you come in. So they squashed it. The girlfriend of the guy that my associate was lambasting is trying to calm him down, and he's biting his lip. I can look and see that this guy does not want to calm down. Not only that, but he doesn't want to hear anything. He's not hearing anything. He is upset. My associate, though, is laughing. Like, hey, I chumped another guy. I punked another guy. Okay? All right. Finally, they're both chosen to go into the club. There's room. They can both go into the club. I don't know how the guy who was with his girlfriend, I don't know how he got a steak knife from the eating area onto the dance floor. Because they're supposed to have enough security to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. happens is he somehow gets a steak knife after he finishes eating. He has a steak knife and he goes and finds himself on a dance floor. Next thing I know, I hear screaming. I hear screaming. When I hear screaming, I turn to the direction of the screams and I see flashing, coming down. And the flashing is not the strobe light. The flashing is not the lighting of the club. The flashing, I can see it's a metal piece. I try to move my way through. I try to move my way through carefully because I don't want to startle the guy who has a knife and then he turns on me and I'm not ready and I don't have room. Okay, so I get through and I finally get through and my associate is there bleeding. He's bleeding. And finally, you know, people jump on a guy who has a knife and enough people overcome him and he goes to prison. But here's the thing. My associate ends up dying. He ends up dying, okay? 26 knife wounds. 26. Most of them in the neck. Most of them in the neck. He was a Golden Glove boxer, brown belt in karate, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, was a very good street fighter. Brown belt in karate, good boxer, purple belt in jiu-jitsu, right? Brazilian jiu-jitsu, good street fighter, right? He was trained in the martial arts, but he wasn't trained in self-protection. Because had he been trained in self-protection, he would have went home. He would have said, that is dim. I've been arguing with a guy who's going into this club. I can still see he's pissed off. Even if he wasn't pissed off, I've argued with this guy. There are people who will act like it's all over and it's not all over. They're just to throw you off. He goes into an area where he goes into an establishment and the guy who he's arguing with, who he threatened, right, who he sees is pissed off, who his girlfriend cannot calm down, he goes into that establishment. If he had been trained in the way that I'm talking about being trained, he would have went home. Not even to another club. Because the guy he's arguing with can go to the club or wait for him outside and shoot him. He would have went home. He would have chalked up that night to just being a wash. Got the problem outside, got an argument outside, whatever. I started the argument, he started the argument, but you know, I got an argument, you know, he could have been in denial. Who knows if he would have admitted that he started the whole thing. But he should not have went into that club. That's what training is. I can take Joe Rogan and Eddie Bravo in a scenario training, just a scenario training, put a kit on them that gives them maximum protection, put them in a club environment. If you talk about the height of Eddie Bravo, a very small man, who has no self-protection experience whatsoever, whose grappling is total sport, and all of his grappling is based on one opponent, his weight. Again, Eddie Bravo, very small in stature, has no self-protection experience. His grappling is sport. And his grappling is not only grappling sport, but his grappling is grappling with one individual and grappling with one individual his weight. We have him. And then we have Joe Rogan, someone who has been mentored by this guy who's a sport grappler whose claim to fame is laying on his back. And we're talking about someone who trained in Taekwondo. In Taekwondo, sport Taekwondo. And when he competed in that sport Taekwondo, he didn't even throw punches to the head. I can get Eddie Bravo and Joe Rogan and bring them to New York City. New York City, New York, right? I can bring them to New York. A scenario, have 20 guys, right? And only want 3 to jump on them, okay? 3 to jump on them. Put a kit on them that gives them maximum protection, and if you saw what happened, you would never ever listen to anything they said ever again unless you were a complete fool. Because there is nothing in their training that makes them qualified to defend themselves against a blade or defend themselves against multiple opponents. Everything they do is sport, and everything they do is against one person, and everything they do is based on comparable weights. That's it. That's it. If you are a black belt in jiu-jitsu, if you are a black belt in karate, if you are a master in Wing Chun, if you have been boxing for 40 years, if you have been wrestling for 20 years, if you have been an MMA champion if you are all those things and you walk around in a congested downtown area, right, of any city, not just a black city, I mean in the Philippines, where violence is higher than it is in most black areas in the United States and in most poor white areas in the UK, in the Philippines, in China, in Tokyo, Japan, you can have a black belt in 17 different martial arts and be a world MMA champion. If you are walking around those areas with your headphones on, and with your earplugs in, and your volume is so high that you don't know a person is next to you until they're right up next to you, parallel to you, then you are not trained. I'm going to repeat that one more time before this video is over. You can have a black belt in 17 different martial arts and be a world champion MMA fighter. If you were walking in a congested area, or any area for that matter, but in particularly a congested area in any parts of the world, around any people, a congested area, okay? And your head plugs, what you're listening to is so loud, your earplugs, whatever you're listening to is so loud, you do not know that a person is next to you until they're almost parallel with you, or a few inches in the back, right, to the back of you. Then you are not trained. Then you are not trained. Being trained is not only hard skills, but it's soft skills. Having awareness, self-awareness, being switched on, knowing about your surroundings, looking at escape routes. When you're in a restaurant, what doors are available for you? What utensils can you instantly pick up? When people are they arguing between themselves? Or is this man so ticked off that he's going to try to take it out on you or someone else because he can't take it out on that person? Or is he likely to take it out on you and someone else after he takes it out on that person? If you are not switched on, then you're not trained. That's what it's about. Being trained in hard skills is not being trained in soft skills. Largely, most of the problems we have, most of the situations we get in, most of the time when people lose their lives, most of the time when people lose their health, or their health is diminished because they've gotten attacked, is because they did not know who they were talking to, where they were at the time, how they could escape, whether they should escape, couldn't mind their own business, couldn't understand the ego and how to kind of extract themselves from a particular situation. But it has nothing to do, for the most part, with your hard skills, what rank you have or who you trained with at all. None in the least. Fight Camp, Save Carmen. Train hard, train smart. See you next video.